it. So basically right now I need to remove my shocks, cut all this crap out, and pretend like it never happened. That sucks. Those look really good, and they cost a bit of money. Welcome back again to Pump the Brakes. Another day at the shop, so it's another weekend. No Adrian today. Gonna try my best to get it all on these cameras, but I'm not alone. I brought Laela with me. She's not very helpful. So I have one plan for today, and I'm hoping that I can get it out of the way quickly. But my intentions for today and my only goal is to fix these. I built these a while ago. I was actually really happy with them. I think they look super cool. But I posted a video of them on my Instagram. Adrian put the video here. I showed cycling my suspension with the shocks installed, and Michael Cox told me that I had fucked up.
Now you fucked up! Now you fucked up!
And I need to get the tops of my mounts as far forward as possible. Basically, the goal is with a trailing arm, so well, with any suspension, but because I'm running a trailing arm, I need the shock 90 degrees to the trailing arm at full bump. And what's happening is my shocks are becoming less than 90, less 90, more angled as the suspension bumps. So it has something he called, I think, a falling shock rate, which is a problem because it makes tuning bad, and it actually makes your shocks and springs, in this case, become less active and less valved as your suspension bumps, which is the exact opposite of what you want. So we're gonna cut all of this off today, and we're gonna try to salvage this tube, and we're gonna print out more of these. Problem with that is that that's 1/4 inch plate. I know that's heavy, but for what we do, that's pretty standard. I need to get more 1/4 inch plate on my plasma table, and it's up here. I am going to try to relocate all this crap. Maximus is on like a frame table, dolly thing, but it's heavy and it doesn't like to roll anymore. So I'm gonna start with that. So the intention here is, obviously this is my coilover, this is my bypass shock, 14-inch travel, let me double check that, 14-inch travel and a 16-inch travel. Just because the way that the trailing arm geometry works, this one needs to travel further than this one. It works out almost exactly right. What I need to do is get these upper bolts forward. The alternatively would be I could move the whole trailing arm rearward. That's not happening. That changes my wheelbase, that changes my bump stops, my sway bar, my drive shafts, my overall design. It's just not happening. And there's actually quite a bit of room here. I can get a few inches pretty easily just by doing like that with my coilover. See, old hole, I could put it there. That would still clear the bolt or the tube, but that's what, 2.5 inches? I need more than that. I think what we'll do is we'll cut these off, throw them out, cut this off, throw it out. I figure I can take probably 2 inches out of right here. So I'll set up my notching jig again to do this exact same notch, but here. And if I do it on the exact same angle, this whole tube will just slide forward, and that should get me like 5 inches farther forward, right? Well, 2.5 plus 2, so 4.5 inches forward, which should put me about there. And I think that's where I want to be. So I'm gonna go for it. So basically right now I need to remove my shocks, cut all this crap out, and pretend like it never happened. Right, right. Zipper, protection, and we'll get that out of the way. I'm gonna pull the fuel tank and the radiator out of there just to protect them. I already got my fuel tank once with a Sawzall. Oh, let's take the bus. Kind of easier. This radiator's been kicking my ass. I want to get it done. I just haven't figured out a way that I am happy with the upper mounting. I've got like my bushings, and I want to tie it into these 3 tubes. I just haven't figured out a way that I actually dig. Not sure what the goal is here. Well, I know what the goal is. The goal is to make a radiator mount that's not going to fuck up. Alright, I'm going to get cutting that out. Got a death wheel. I'm going to cut the tacks. This should all come up pretty quick. I just don't want to drop everything, ideally. That sucks. Those look really good. And they cost a bit of money. All right. So I think that was pretty self-explanatory. Realize that this is kind of seems like a small and minor problem, but if I can make something better, I'm going to make it better, especially at this stage. Like, if you're gonna spend that much money on shocks and put this much effort into axles and buggy and to do all this shit, you might as well do it the best job you can, right? And I am never the guy that will leave a part attached to a project or leave something the way it is because of time invested. It's probably why my projects take way fucking longer than they need to, but they always turn out really good because of it. The plan is, I'm gonna cut this off at the exact same angle again, and this is gonna end up there-ish, right? So that will give me the pocket I need here to put my coil over and my bypass back where they belong. So I'm gonna clean this thing up, and when I come back, this thing will be re-notched and ready to go back in. So I got the notch done on the tube. They are not perfectly in line with each other, so obviously there's going to be some tweaking there. I don't think that was the final notch anyway. It's super rough, as you can see, but it is shorter also, as you can see. Or maybe I'll point the camera where you're looking. So I outlined everything as it was. Obviously need to clean those tacks up and those tacks up, but then you can also see where it was up here, and it's a 2 inches shorter, but then there's a gap there. So if I tweak this notch just a little bit right up in there to there, I think I'll be able to get this perfect. I don't like going and taking all of the material out at once in case I'm wrong, and it happens.
Say what?
Oh, that's where I'm at. I'm gonna hit that with the grinder, clean up that notch. That'll get me to my 2 inches up there, and then we'll be golden. Clean up the welds, clean up the tube, I'll tack it in, and then we'll go to the computer and we'll start drawing up new shock mounts. This might actually be a pretty easy project.
Are you helping?
All right, I got the tube fitted beautifully. Beautifully-ish. There you go. See, I put a mark where it used to be 2 inches forward. I used an actual tape measure for that. And there you go. That's what this thing's gonna end up. So I gotta knock off the old welds. This thing's ready-ish. I should prep the tube a little better. It's ready to go in. We're gonna clean it up. We're gonna tack it in, and then we're gonna start drawing up the shock mounts. These things with a brake on them. Yeet the disc. And the battery's done. I was done anyway, I think. Wait, I'm gonna prep the tube a bit, and then we're going to put it in place. By prep, I just mean sand like the black shit off. So everything's a little more prepped now. I'm happy with how it fits, so I'm just gonna tic-tac it. It is time to make new plates. This plate is kind of optional, right? We'll talk about that in a minute. But for now, I'm gonna grab the coilover. We're gonna put it back up in here. We're sitting at ride height right now. See, level. So it is pretty convenient because I can then set up my coilover with 50% of the shock shaft showing, and that tells me where the top needs to be. So 14-inch travel coilover. Obviously that means 7 inches of shaft showing. I can see the jokes coming.
In inches, how much cleavage does a woman show before it's too much? 7.
That is 6 1/4. That is 7. Come on, just over 7. Close enough. So that's how far forward I can get now. Realistically, there's still a bit in there, but I don't need to push it. So that's where I want to live now. The distance that the coil or the bypass is longer than the coilover, that is already in my file, so like that's easy just to work with. I'll just keep the relationship the same. But I need to figure out how to move that to here. This was the corner where the two met. So this is an 1 3/4 tube. The shock spacing's an 1.5 inches. So these don't actually go on the outside of the tube, they go near the outside of the tube. Holy shit, so I can't have nice things. Clears-ish. I can make sure it clears when it's in the computer because I know the offset from the edge of the tube to that, so I'll just make sure that I maintain a clearance in there. Will that get me forward? 2.5 inches, which is what I said earlier, I think. Pull back the tape. Cool, that was my eyeball earlier. Not that this was super accurate. So we're gonna move that 2.5 inches forward as long as the program allows for that. I need to measure the angle this is at because I matched this angle here, like where the tape is, to the shoulder on the shock because it looked really fucking trick at ride height when it like all matched. I'll do that again, but I need to know the new angle. The new angle is 2.7 degrees. I don't know if any of this is going to show up on the screen here. This is the plate I already had there, and for some reason I drew it with the top of the shocks being my reference level. So I rotated it to reality and modified it, which I think is this one now. And that's the new one. So this is the new design. We will cut this out on the plasma table and hold it up there and see how it looks. So as I said, there wasn't enough 1/4 inch material on the table, so I have to do the god-awful shuffling plate from above the table to on the table by myself. Layla's no help, she doesn't even have thumbs, which is the reason why I moved everything, cleaned everything. So let's do it. Fucking forklift didn't start. Thought I'd bring you along this awesome adventure and show you what happens when the forklift doesn't start. So it's like a Beamer. If you try to start it, then you let go, you can't fucking start it again. But if you don't let go, you can like rapid fire the starter solenoid. Sometimes you get it cooked for a second, then you go back at her. Usually it'll go. Come on, baby. There she is. That's how you start the General Lee. Go, Layla, be careful. Good girl. Two-wheeling razor. Something super cool happened to the razor yesterday. Adrian and I were down here for whatever reason we were down here for, and we could hear some Harleys like up the street, and it sounded like they were up to nefarious actions. So we decided to go for a rip. I took the razor up the street to the power station above here, and there was a bunch of people like tuning on their Harleys. It was freaking badass. So it turns out they're kind of famous. They have a name. They're called the Vanishing Ones. So they do like Harley stunt shows, which is fucking badass. I knew that was a thing. I've just never seen them before. I just thought they were a couple kids fucking around. So anyway, I went up there and ended up two-wheeling the razor while they were like drifting their Harleys around me. It was fucking cool. Well, wasn't that exciting? That is how we change over big sheets of steel on the table. Rarely we need an entire sheet of steel, but we often need multiple types of steel. So we'll cut some quarter, some 12 gauge, and some 3/8, like all in the same day. And when you have a full sheet on the table, it's only a 5x10 table, I can only cut one type of material in a day. So typically what we do is we put a sheet on the table, we murk a bunch of it, throw that skeleton away, and then cut what's left in half. And then that gives us small pieces to work with. Then we can throw a chunk of 3/8, a chunk of quarter, and then a chunk of 12 gauge, all like 4x4s on the table. And that works with us. Oh my God, that's not good for my table. Anyway, I'm gonna get this thing squared up and cut out the piece that we talked about. Here is my antiquated program for my plasma table. Once again, this is sheet cam. I'm going to import my drawing that I just did. Rear upper shock mount, second design. Bring it in. Now it's on a funky angle because of what I did. I'm gonna rotate it to be as flat as possible. Ooh, that's looking good. All right, 0 the Y, 0 the X, and then my shitty old program didn't work. So we're gonna have to click and drag. Oh man, I should flip it over because I can fit another one in there and nest the software or the program. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna nest them now. We're gonna put this one down there, this one in it, because look how well those nest together. They're both gonna be exactly the same. Yeah, it's gonna cut this bottom one first. Perfect. So now I'm gonna save it. Saved. We're gonna load it. There it is. Okay, and we gotta bring that thing all the way back. And that's it. But what I need to do is I need to change over to the 45 amp consumables and get the compressor going. So I'm gonna do that. All right, I got the plasma table ready to go. I am going to show you what it looks like cutting it. I don't know if you fucking care. Adrian might not even put it in the video, but I'm gonna cut one. We're gonna hit V hold so we can test fit the one and see how we like it. And if we do, then we'll hit go on the next one, and that way they'll have nested together really well. And here we go. I have air now too. Oh, I gotta turn the plasma down. 245 amps, there it is. Here we go. There you go. That thing's still going? I don't even want to talk about what just happened. Okay, well, my table fucked up, and I thought this was something that I had fixed, but apparently I didn't, so that kind of pisses me off. Because when it fucked up, it cut like ass, and this thing is not super accurate, but it is what we designed. And once again, lining up in roughly where it was last time. There's tons of fucking swarf or dross or whatever on this thing, but that's the piece in the end. It's pretty sleek and minimalistic compared to what was there, so probably about half the weight. Let's try to do a better job. I might clean this one up, tack it on there, and then test fit the two shocks, and then I'll bring you back along at that point. So what I have showing is 6 1/4, so that's 3/4 of an inch off of center, and 8 1/2. So this one is 3/4 of an inch in from where I want it, and this one is 1/2 of an inch out. So I mean, that's quite a bit. That's 1 1/4 out of equal. So what I'm gonna do right now is I'm going to pray this shit doesn't fall apart because it's kind of half-assed in there, and I'm gonna cycle the suspension up and down and see where that lands the shock travels at full bump, because bump is where it really matters, right? So that's what I'm gonna do now. I'm gonna drive in the general, we're gonna the axle all the way up and see if it's as equally fucked at full bump as it is at ride height. Don't want to scratch. Well, let's look. Bump stop, obviously not where it needs to be because something here is bottomed out. It is the coilover. Coilover is bottomed out. Bypass still has about 5/8 showing. So that 1 1/4 we talked about earlier obviously isn't as bad as I thought, because at full bump, this trailing arm is obviously going slightly uphill, which leads me to believe that a lot of this work is for fucking nothing, because I don't think I'm gonna get, I mean, look where the coilover would have to be 90 degrees to this. I think I almost need to lose this bar right here bring it into the passenger compartment, and then really get these shocks forward. Oh boy. Really hope not. So Laela and I have been crunching the numbers, and well, frankly, I've been thinking about it over a beer.
5 or 6 brewskis.
5 or 6?
7 or 8. Good call.
You'll black out.
And I think that there is a solution. I'm going to take another ½ inch out of here. Look how awful that line is. And I only had half a beer.
Julian.
So that'll be 2½ inches I take out of the tube, 2½ inches I take out of the plate. That won't affect the relationship between the coilover and the tube. So I cycled the suspension from ride height to bump, and the shock angle changes about ½ degree. ½ degree in the wrong direction, right? It gets more steep, but it's getting closer. And to keep that in mind, this one, which we've decided is not parallel to this one because I screwed up, this needs to go forward or this needs to go back, but this one changed almost a degree. So just that 1 inch is gonna make a difference. So I think that ½ inch is gonna make a difference also, and maybe get me out of my bad ½ degree change that I'm getting. I'm going to fix the bypass, figure out how to get this parallel to that. So this angle won't change, this distance will change, this angle won't change, this profile won't change, and I think that'll fix everything enough. It'll be far better than it was. So that's the goal right now. I'm going to cut everything apart, quickly notch that, and redesign this plate, and we'll regroup and I will catch up with you then. Well, it's been a difficult 10 minutes and I had to do a lot of thinking, and Laela has helped me out a ton. She didn't do shit. I came up with what I'm considering my new final plan. I ended up coping that tube up 5/8 of an inch. That's what 5/8 of an inch looks like. You can see my shitty ass line that I drew on there that didn't mean shit in the end. You can see here, original end. That's where I left you guys. That was the ½ inch I spoke of, and that is what I got. I don't know why I added an extra 1/8 of an inch there. It was kind of just what it took to get everything to fit nice. And I could get it. It looked good. I went for it. You might as well do it the best job you can, right? And I am never the guy that will leave a part attached to a project or leave something the way it is because of time invested. Realistically, at a ½ inch, the notch was good enough, but I went for a little more because I figured that's kind of where it draws the line now. So this is the one that we cut off this morning. This is the last one that I left you guys with. It's the one that the table fucked up on. You can see right there. There's not a lot of difference between this one and this one, as you can tell, but I guess you can see it's a little chunkier right there. That is exactly the same right there. Point to point is exactly the same, but as you can see, I moved the bypass shock. I punched all of this shit into the computer, into CAD, and I was cycling the suspension. It was pretty cheap CAD, but I mean, I was using lines and points and math and numbers and angles, and I cycled the suspension, and the bypass shock is the limiting factor, not the coilover. So that little bit that I'm out on the coilover from bang on is gonna lead to almost no difference in the end. So I figured focus on angles, not on ride height just this minute. I mean, we're talking about a fraction of an inch. So it's not a big deal. I also did the math on what my shocks angle are going to change, which is what this is all for, right? So from full bump to ride height, my shocks are traveling in the right direction. They're getting progressively stiffer or progressively more optimum. And from ride height to full bump, it is 0.75-ish of a degree of change in the wrong direction, but very, very minor. So I feel like this is as close to perfect as I can get this thing. So that is why I opted for the way I went. Fuck yeah, I'm gonna tack this thing together, and then we'll test fit the shocks again. It should look fantastic. Come along, won't you? So this is not actually going to be the final tacking into placeage, because I am going to use the coilover as a spacer when I do that. So that's looking good. Final one. Gonna grab the bypass, gonna grab the coilover, we're gonna shovel it in there. I think we'll cycle the suspension one more time. And when that is good, I think I will fully burn in this tube. And then we will get another plate cut out. We'll use the shock as a spacer, just because I want to keep it in line. And then we will burn, well, we'll tack those in today. That's good. 3/16 of an inch clearance between the hat of the shock and this tube inside there. So lots of room. That thing shouldn't move at all. If that moves, there's fucking big problems. But it shouldn't touch either, right? These bypass shocks are fucking heavy. I could weigh one. Should I weigh one? Those look money now, eh? Same angle. I took a 1/2 inch out of that, down, because when I cycled this thing to full bump, this had a 1/2 inch of shaft showing, this had none. So now they should bump at the same time. The bump stop had shaft showing when these were bottomed out, and that's the exact opposite of what you want. We actually want a little bit of shock shaft showing when it hits full bump, because then the bump stop is taking all of the load and the hit before you damage your shock absorbers. Look at this. Like I said, bump stop, no es bueno. That's a lot of shaft showing. It actually concerns me a little bit, because how am I gonna get this that much lower, right? Because I mean, there's more shaft showing than can left. But I'm fully bottomed out, almost bottomed out. Sure would be nice if that went up a little bit, wouldn't it? It's like there's still room for improvement. See, I'm not getting all of my travel if I'm bottoming out the coilover before the bypass, because the bypass is my limiting factor here. Fuck, is this gonna be revision 4? I'd almost like to go up a bit with that one. But up a bit with that is bad for my angles, but it would be good for my bump travel. Decisions, hey? Trying to keep the buggy low. In order to keep the buggy low, I need to keep all my shock mounts high. That makes sense, because I need my bump travel to stuff up in here. So every bit of travel that isn't bump travel up into the buggy is droop travel. And if it's droop travel and I want to keep my 50-50 shock shaft showing at ride height, well then that's lifting the buggy every time. So the whole goal is to keep this thing low and squat and center of gravity where we need it. I feel like there might be another revision here. See, I could take some out of this part of the tube too, which goes up. Because keeping in mind, trailing arm is a lever arm, so a little movement here is a lot of movement here. So a 1/2 inch there equals about an inch here. So little movements equal big changes when you're dealing with trailing arms. So it's really important we nail this. This isn't even adjustable. I can't change anything here. That's part of the trailing arm kit I bought. So it's really important I nail this right now. So I am going to do another revision. This is getting expensive and tiring. This is why we tack things. Well, you know what they say, 4th time's the charm. I went through these revisions. That's where we started. And that's what I ended up with. That's the 4th design of the bracket. I travel where I want it, put my shock shafts where I wanted it, put full bump where I wanted it. Bump stops are gonna have to be lowered, which is not gonna look as good as I want, but we can work with it. It's going to be okay. What has happened is I have modified this tube, which is the same as that tube right over there, to the point that I no longer trust myself to be able to easily just go off the measurements that I said I did. So I think I'm going to get the table to cut out 4 of these things and then take apart this side again and copy it onto the other side. Just trace it, set it up so that I know I get the exact same thing. Go off of marks, measurements, all that shit, slam it up in there. I'll have all 4 cut and tack it all in. Do we put a JK panel back in there? I think so. I think it looks plain without it. And I think there's gonna be a bar across here. That one doesn't fit worth shit. That's probably why it's not welded. Across here, and then these are gonna be cool panels. And I think the resi is gonna end up right there. It's out of harm's way, and I should be able to service the top to charge the nitrogen easily. That's the plan anyway. So I'm gonna make some progress on this. There's no point in showing you what I'm doing because it's just the same shit I've been doing. And I'll catch you up again when I have at least one side done. Well, that's it for this episode of Pump the Brakes. I've had enough. The shock mounts aren't done, but I am. Layla wants to go home and eat. And I'm gonna finish this shit up, and I'm not gonna waste all my time trying to keep you guys in the loop because what you've seen is the gist of it. There's nothing else really to report here. Up next is obviously duplicating this on the other side. I'm gonna move these bump stops down on the chassis so that way it protects the shocks rather than doing basically fucking nothing. By the time you come back and see this again, there should be quite a bit of progress. And then we're gonna move on to cooler shit like fuel tanks, radiators, and trying to get this pig fired up. So make sure you like this video, make sure you ring the bell so you can see the next video, and subscribe so you can follow along on the Maximus build. What do you guys think? Did I do an okay job recording myself while I was trying to do the work? It's a lot of work. I didn't realize how hard that shit is, but I did my best. Let me know in the comments if you think I managed to pull it off.